Casey Jones. His name was Casey Jones. There's never been a man who could drive a train as fast as Casey. When Casey was a young man, the railroad was about the fastest way of getting around. This was back before the time of airplanes or rocket ships, even before fast cars or trucks. Casey drove a train on the Illinois Central line. He lived to sit way up in the cabin with his hand on the throttle. That's the handle you use to make the train go slower, or in Casey's case, faster. He loved to see the trees and fields go whizzing by. He loved to make the whistle blow, and there was no other train with a whistle like Casey's. It started out soft, like a whippoorwill, then rose to a howl, like a coyote crying in the night, then faded away into a ghostly whisper. People always knew when Casey was coming. Even before they could see the train, they could hear the powerful chugga, 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 chugga getting louder and louder. Then they'd hear that wild whistle howl. People used to say that when Casey blew his whistle, why, little babies would wake up from their naps, but they wouldn't cry. Instead, they'd make little chugga, chugga, woo, woo sounds, then fall back to sleep. And people said that when Casey blew his whistle, the cows would give an extra quart of milk, and the chickens lay at least a dozen eggs each. And if you hurried, you could take one of those eggs and crack it into a cold frying pan and put out a piece of plain bread. And just as soon as Casey went by, there in that pan would be a nicely fried egg, over easy, and on the side of the plate, a hot buttered toast. The reason Casey drove so fast was he took pride in always being on time. He wanted to get the train where it was going when it was supposed to be there, or even a little before. Whenever he started on a trip, the railroad men would wave and yell, "Bring her in on time, Casey," and they knew he would. But you can't make a train go fast all by yourself. Casey needed a good fireman to help him, and he had one of the best in Sim Webb. The fireman on a train doesn't put out fires, no. Sim Webb kept the fire going by shoveling coal into it, which got the flames hot, which made it steam, which made the train go fast and got the train in on time. Once Casey and Sim almost did make it on time. They were carrying a load of mail to Memphis, Tennessee, and it was raining cats and dogs. Some people say the rain had been falling for 5 or 6 weeks, and the railroad track was like a bed of a creek. At the station in Memphis, the railroad men waited for Casey to arrive. Some said there's no way he can make it on time with all this rain. He'll have to slow down. But others said, just you wait. Casey Jones always makes it on time. Running on time is his hobby. And sure enough, just then they saw a light on the tracks up ahead, and heard the lonesome whistle that could only be Casey's, and the train pulled into the station dripping wet, puffing hard, but on time. Casey and Sim were dog-tired, looking forward to a good night's sleep, but they had hardly settled into bed when a knock came at the door. It seems that the engineer who was supposed to drive the train on the southbound run was sick. Well, they didn't even have to ask Casey if he would take the man's place. Tired as he was, Casey got dressed and headed for the train, and when he got there, he found Sim Webb already stoking the fire with coal, getting the train ready to carry mail, packages, and some passengers as well. As Casey mounted to the cabin and took the throttle in his hand, he heard someone shout, "Casey, you're already more than half an hour late." But Casey just smiled and thought to himself, "Guess that means I'll have to go a little faster." He opened up the throttle, and the train plunged into the dark, wet night. Sim Webb shoveled the coal as fast as he could, and the train chugged on faster and faster. "Casey," Sim yelled, "you running too fast?" And Casey said, "I believe we'll make it though, for the engine is a-steamin' better than I ever knew." And Casey said, "Fireman, don't you fret. Keep knocking at the fire door and don't give up yet." am going to run this train till she leaves the rail, or we make it on time with the southbound mail. Casey was highballing down the tracks, which means he was pushing that train just as fast as it would go. He was going so fast that it looked like they might even make it on time. But then, as they squealed around a curve through the darkness, Casey saw a light up ahead. But that light wasn't supposed to be there, not on this track. Then Casey knew there was a train stuck on the track just ahead, and he was speeding straight toward it. Casey pulled the brake as hard as he could and yelled, "Jump, Sim." "Casey, you come on," said Sim. "Jump," Casey shouted, and Sim jumped. But Casey stayed on. He knew he couldn't stop the train in time, but he also knew he had to slow it down. He knew if he jumped and let go of the brake, it might mean the death for the passengers on the train. So Casey pulled on the brake with all his might, and a terrible screeching, squealing sound ripped through the darkness. The trains, they met in the middle of a hill. He tried to do his duty, the men all said. Casey Jones mounted the cabin, Casey Jones' throttle in his hand, and took his farewell trip to the promised land. Poor Casey. When they found him, he still had his hand tied on the throttle and one hand tied on the brake. The passengers lived because Casey stayed at his post and did his duty. People say that if you look up into the sky at night and see a flash across the sky, it might be a shooting star. But then again, it might be Casey Jones highballing across the heavens. Chugga chugga, chugga chuggin', now and forever. On time till the end of time. Johnny Appleseed. This is the story of John Chapman, better known as Johnny Appleseed. He lived in this country a long time ago, when America was still growing, and there weren't many towns or cities, but there was a lot of wide open land. Johnny was an unusual kind of hero. He didn't lead soldiers in war, and he didn't become president. He didn't sail ships across the oceans. He didn't hunt dragons or rescue princesses. But still, he was a real hero. And what he did best was, well, you'll see. People say that when Johnny was a baby, he'd fuss and cry and keep the family awake until they put a twig with apple blossoms in his little hand. Then he wouldn't bang the petals off or eat them like other babies would. Instead, he'd just lie there in his crib, looking at those apple blossoms, sniffing at them now and then, as happy as an angel full of ice cream. When Johnny was a little boy, his mother would wander with him in the woods and show him plants and squirrels and such. He loved the birds and animals almost as much as he loved apples and apple trees. He was never happier than when he was lugging around some little animal or other, even if it was a skunk. And whenever an animal in the neighborhood was sick or had a broken leg, people would say, "Just take it over to Johnny Chapman. He'll fix it." When Johnny grew up, he had an idea, and he couldn't get it out of his head. His idea was that there ought to be more apple trees, lots more, and he was just the guy to plant them. But he couldn't carry trees all over the country. What he needed was seeds, and lots of seeds. Close to where Johnny lived, there were mills where folks made apple cider. They pressed the juice out of the apples and had no use for the seeds. But Johnny could use them. He took the seeds, washed them off, let them dry in the sun. When he finished, he had sacks and sacks full of seeds. So Johnny set off westward, carrying his apple seeds. He carried so many seeds that he couldn't bring along much of anything else. He found a place for his two favorite books, the Bible and Aesop's Fables. And he needed a cooking pan, so he wore that on his head. Johnny walked all over the country, sleeping out in the open, eating whatever was handy, tramping through the mud and snow. He walked and walked, stopping here and there to plant the seeds all along rivers and meadows, wherever people would let him. Whenever he met a family moving west, which was a lot of families in those days, he'd give them a little pouch of seeds so they could grow their own apple trees. And that's how folks came to know him as Johnny Appleseed. Some people thought Johnny was foolish because he gave away his seeds for free. And these people thought that it only made sense to do something if you were going to make money doing it. But Johnny Appleseed would say, "Money," and he would snap his fingers. "What do you do with money? Just spend it for clothes or houses or food?" Then without taking a cent from anyone, he'd be on his way. When anybody brought up the subject of animals, Johnny Appleseed was likely to go through that finger-snapping business again. "Leave animals alone," he'd say, "and they'll do the same by you. They're your brothers and sisters, sort of. Only they don't borrow clothes, and they don't argue with you the way human brothers and sisters do." Once, on a cold winter's day, Johnny was slushing through the snow and night came. He looked around for some big hollow log to sleep in. He found one, built a fire nearby, cooked his mush, ate it, and started to crawl into the hollow log. When he got into his hips, he heard a groaning grunt. Peeking in, he saw a big bear lying in there with his paws crossed on his chest, enjoying his winter snooze. Johnny backed out, inch by inch, slow as a snail, being quiet so as not to disturb the bear's sleep. "Beg your pardon, Brother Bear," he whispered. Then he yawned, stretched out, and curled up in the snow. Johnny Appleseed had something he believed in, and he went to a lot of trouble to bring it about. He wanted to see a nation of apple orchards, with apple trees in bloom in the spring, and the men and women and children everywhere strong, and good, and healthy, like Johnny himself. Johnny lived a long time, but people say that even today, if you go to a certain part of Ohio in apple blossom time, and get there before sunrise, and go to a certain old apple tree, you'll see the smoke from Johnny's fire as it dies out. Maybe you'll even catch a glimpse of Johnny's spirit as it moves along westward with the spring, waking up the blossoms and tending the orchards. Why the evergreen trees never lose their leaves. Winter was coming, and the birds had flown far to the south, where the air was warm and they could find berries to eat. One little bird had broken its wing and couldn't fly with the others. It was alone in the cold world of frost and snow. The forest looked warm, and it made its way to the trees as well as it could, to ask for help. First it came to a birch tree. "Beautiful birch tree," it said, "my wing is broken, and my friends have flown away. May I live among your branches till they come back for me?" "No," answered the birch tree, drying her fair green leaves away. "We of the great forest have our own birds to help. I can do nothing for you." "The birch isn't very strong," said the little bird to itself, "and it might be that she could not easily hold me. I'll ask the oak." So the bird said, "Great oak tree, you're so strong. Can I please live on your boughs till my friends come back in the springtime?" "In the springtime?" cried the oak. "That's a long way off. How do I know what you might do in all that time? Birds are always looking for something to eat, and you might even eat up some of my acorns. Maybe I should ask the willow. Maybe he'll be kind," thought the bird. And so it said, "Gentle willow, my wing is broken. I couldn't fly to the south with the other birds. Can I please live on your branches till springtime?" The willow didn't look gentle then, for she drew herself up proudly and said, "Indeed, I don't know you. And we willows never talk to people whom we don't know." Very likely there are trees somewhere that will take in strange birds. Leave me at once. The poor little bird didn't know what to do. Its wing was not yet strong, but it began to fly as well as it could. Before it had gone far, a voice was heard. "Little bird," it said, "where are you going?" "Indeed, I don't know," answered the little bird sadly. "I'm very cold." "Come here, then," said the friendly spruce tree, for it was her voice that had called. "You'll live on my warmest branch all winter if you choose." "Will you really let me?" asked the little bird eagerly. "Indeed I will," answered the kind-hearted spruce tree. "If your friends have flown away, it is time for the trees to help you. Here is the branch where my leaves are thickest and softest." "My branches aren't very thick," said the friendly pine tree, "but I'm big and strong, and I can keep the north wind from you and the spruce." "I can help too," said the little juniper tree. "I can give you berries all winter long, and every bird knows that juniper berries are good." So the spruce gave the lonely little bird a home, the pine kept the cold north wind away, and the juniper gave it berries to eat. The other trees looked on and talked together wisely. "I don't want strange birds on my bough," said the birch. "I'll not give my acorns away for anyone," said the oak. "I never have anything to do with strangers," said the willow, and the three trees drew their leaves closely about them. In the morning all those shining green leaves lay on the ground, for a cold north wind had come in the night, and every leaf that it touched fell from the tree. "May I touch every leaf in the forest?" asked the wind in its frolic. "No," said the Frost King. "The trees that have been kind to the little bird with the broken wing may keep their leaves. This is why the leaves of the spruce, the pine, and the juniper are always green."